Hey everyone, we're back for another episode of Enlightened Masculinity. I'm one of your hosts, Yogi Chris, PhD, founder of Ninth Limb Yoga, travel the world teaching Ninth Limb Yoga, and also have a PhD in the Normal Universities. My co-host is Akash Inti from New Jersey. He's a biotech research analyst and also a registered yoga teacher, has his yoga following there in New Jersey called the Rising Suns. Welcome to the show, Akash. Let us know what is the topic idea for this episode.
Yeah, brother. Amazing to be on today. Love our conversations every single time. Today, I want to talk about implied communication. It's an idea that we touched upon in the last episode, but I really wanted to dive deeper into it, kind of really explaining, first off, why is implied communication important, and then defining it as well. I know we both have been really studying communication from many different angles and applying it in many different facets of our life over the past time that we've spent together. Not only studying together, but even prior to that. So I wanted to make some distinctions for our listeners today on implied communication itself. So I guess I want to turn it to you and first off, just ask you, maybe we start with what is implied communication? How would you define it?
Well, I'm going to look it up actually, implied definition. And it means suggest but not directly expressed. So implicit. So to imply is strongly suggest the truth or existence of something but not stated. So let's see, it's from late Middle English implere, from Latin implicare, to fold. Oh, that's in the fold. That's what that means. So it's like in the, it's like if you conceal something, you fold it, and then it's like in there. Imply, 14th century, so that's the 1300s. First recorded was 1300, to hint at, involve something unstated as a logical consequence. Yeah, to involve something unstated. So, imply is to involve something unstated, So let's say, if you could interpret somebody's communication as having a different meaning than the literal meaning of what they're saying. Literal meaning, if you took that language, whatever the words they said, typed it out, gave it to somebody out of context, that's the literal meaning of it. And if you you maybe lose something when you take it out of context, so give them the context even, but make the context general, because if you see it within the dialogue, the reader may observe that there's something being implied, that there could be a secondary or many alternative communications that are being that are seeping through. They're between the lines, and but now a lot of communication can be interpreted a second way. So what makes it an implied communication is that the other person intended, or rather, maybe it doesn't need to be intended, but it's strong. It's not like a small deviation where you, let's say there's a technique in social dynamics, men and women and how they're talking in the early stages of a relationship, from zero to relationship. There's a technique to actually intentionally misinterpret what she says, especially to intentionally misinterpret what she says early in the courtship, mind you. Now you can do this at any time in the relationship. It's funny actually, but early in the relationship, because so often guys are hungry for the girl and the girl is hungry for a guy friend, like actually a friend that wants to hang around her but doesn't always want to get in her pants. And she's lacking that, and he's probably lacking girls compared to his appetite for it, So that's coming out in his communication. He's hungry for her affection and her sensuality, and she's hungry for just like a friend, like a guy to be her friend. And so a technique to flip it on the girl is, she says something, I don't know, she says something and you falsely interpret it to be that she was hitting on you, and be like, hey, buy me a drink before you hit on me. But she didn't mean it that way, but you falsely interpreted it that way. That doesn't necessarily mean that she was implying it. It just meant that you're capable of taking someone's language and interpreting it from some odd angle that it could feasibly be that, but that's not implied communication, because they didn't intend it, and it wasn't a strong implication, meaning it wasn't a strong secondary current of energy. But if you're listening to someone talk or in a text or in the context of their communication, if it feels like there's a strong current of energy, because communication is energy, if there's a strong energy that's not being said, and if you're in person with somebody, if they have a facial expression that's incongruent with their tone, if they have a tone that's incongruent with their language, like the classic would be like, "Oh, that's funny." Really? That's not funny. You didn't laugh. That's not what funny is. There is something being said in that other than "that's funny." That's funny, exclamation point, means something. And it should not be accompanied by some bland, low-pitched, monotone voice. That's funny. That's not what it is. So you could say there's an implication there. The implication is it's not really funny. I'm just saying this dishonest thing because I think that's what I'm supposed to say. So that's minor. But so that's implied communication is when there's an energy wanting to be expressed, but hasn't found the language to properly express that energy. And so it's coming out in other ways, through the face, through the tone, through just bad communication, saying something in a wrong way, because really you're wanting to say something different and it's seeping out in this weird way. Your language is giving away what you're really thinking about. And that's how I don't think I really did it justice what implied communication is, but I don't know. Would you improve on that, or what's your 2 cents on that, Akash?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've taken away from AVD's teachings is this concept of the alignment of your intention, your speech, and your actions. So when we think of, so this will come back to implied communication. I'm just going to go about it in a roundabout way. I'll be talking about it by getting on the idea of integrity. So integrity is when your intention, what you're thinking about when you're communicating, your mindset, your words, the words that you're saying out loud, and then the actions that you follow through with are all aligned. This is a person who has integrity. Now, if you have a shift, so if your mindset is different than the way that you're expressing your words and the actions that you're taking, there's implied communication as a result of the unalignment of. So let me ground this in reality, at least from my experience. So if I were to think right now, okay, I would love to have a sip of water. I voice, oh, I'm going to go take a sip of water, and then I grab my water bottle and drink it. There's integrity to that. I thought the thought, I said the communication to inform the others around me that I'm going to take my water bottle, and then I acted and took my water bottle. Now, if I were to think, oh man, I'm really thirsty right now, and then I were to say, kind of dry in here, yeah, and then it doesn't matter really the action that I take. And and the action is that I'm looking at my water bottle, there is an unalignment there, because I'm thinking in my mind that I'm thirsty. I'm looking at the water bottle, and I'm communicating that it's kind of dry in here. Yeah. Anyone else in the room around me would notice that I said that communication, but I was looking at the water bottle the whole time. There would be an implication. There would be implied communication that I'm thirsty as a result of this. So what I'm trying to say is that implied communication, the way I understand it, is that when you don't align your mindset, your words, and the actions that you follow through on, you're implying communication, whether you're aware of it or not. Now, I see DC ask the question of, can someone literally teach you communication? Yes, someone can teach you communication, but they're not teaching you communication in the way that, like, oh, this is how you speak, this is what you do, blah, blah, blah. What they're teaching you is how to have integrity. In other words, how to make sure that what you're thinking, the words that you say, and the actions that you take are congruent. This is so, so important in the sense that you want to be a good communicator.
Hey, so, also be aware, because of the podcast recording, sometimes you hit the mic with your hand.
Thank you. So it's just for extra emphasis. In all seriousness, though, when you study communication, what you're studying, I guess, on the side or in parallel, is actually how to have more integrity in your life. So I wanted to address that at DC because I think that's a really good question in the sense of how does one study communication from another? Well, it's like you're starting to make more distinctions within yourself where you're not aligned or where you don't have integrity in your persona and being. This is something that I can speak for myself that I only get these distinctions more and more as a result of study. As I see others who aligned their communication so clearly, and that everything that they're thinking, saying, um, and acting on there is an integrity to it is so important. Now, getting back to the idea of like how can you use implied communication? Well, there's certain places, as Yogi Chris had mentioned earlier, in the sense of game, right? It's like your mindset, um, you're thinking that you purposefully misunderstand a girl for play. So the mindset is like, let's say, you used a great example earlier. So like, let's say you had I don't know, she was wearing a red shirt, and you know from her that red is her least favorite color, for example. You could think in your mind, wow, that's a really cool shirt. Like you might genuinely admire it. You might say, hmm, interesting. This is a poor example, but the idea being that like as you study communication, you align your the mindset, the words, and the action. This in turn can be used in terms of if you disalign it, you can do it purposefully, but there's a purpose as to what you're implying, and you may leave some vagueness in that area, if you will, to allow the other person to understand or pull out certain things from it that you don't want to say necessarily, but you can harness that, take that communication, or have them take that idea internally and work with it. So it allows you some flexibility and wiggle room, but implied communication has a lot of uses, well, particularly in areas where you're kind of maybe walking around eggshells. You know, someone's not necessarily comfortable with a topic or some such thing. It's a great way of sorting around that issue for reasons that may be useful. So, Yogi Chris, how have you used implied communication, I guess, intentionally in your life or in your communication? Have there been times where you've taken time to craft uh, areas of communication where someone could misinterpret you in a particular way, but you wanted to allow that wiggle room of misinterpretation? Could you speak a little bit about this?
Yeah, all the time. And I think, if I could go back and redo my whole definition of implied communication, I would just summarize it as unspoken communication. Implication is unspoken communication. And so you must be able to feel communication. That's the first step. You're not going to get good at, drawing out people's implied communications until you can feel communication. You must be able to feel it like an energy, like a touch, like an emotion, like anything. Feel it like your physical body, because that's the sounding board of the communication. You are experiencing other people's communication with your body. So you got to be able to, feel communication. How I use implicate, I don't have a ton of examples. Like I don't have any really laid out, but I would use implied communications all the time. Like, let's say I'm a world traveling yoga instructor. Well, that's implies that I've been a lot of places to teach. Now I've only taught like 2 places internationally so far, and not taught a lot in those 2 locations, but it's only 3 countries. But that's international. So the implication is it's been all over the world. I teach the world over. Well, yeah, because I have a subscriber from Albania, and I have a subscriber from Brazil, and I have a subscriber from New Zealand in my program. I teach the world over. That doesn't mean I go there. Now, I will. That's going to happen, and I have been many places. I've been many places that people actually 3 other countries. Okay, so 4 countries I've taught it. And is that it? Yeah, because that one doesn't count. So, there's an implication when I say I'm a world traveling yoga instructor. People are going to extract from that their own personal meanings that isn't exactly what I said. Let's say, what's another time that I might use an implied communication? Um, mm, I think most of the examples that are coming to mind, and I don't have a lot of like solid sound bites, but it's kind of like what you were just saying, where you give the other person a little bit of wiggle room. So I'm thinking of like an example of, let's say she asks me, "Do you like this dress?" And I would say like, "I don't hate the dress." And so there's a little wiggle room there where there's an implied communication that she can go through because I didn't explicitly say no, I don't like it. I wasn't literal. What's another example of like an implied communication of not much else is coming to mind. I think most of my implications, I'm not very good at implying negative things. Because if I'm feeling negative or if I see something negative I want to call out, I just go really literal on it. And so I think a lot of my implications would be on the high end of like, I'm a doctor. I mean, I'm a PhD, but that's a doctor. So that would be like an implication. People might think I'm implying I'm a medical doctor. But no, I am a doctorate. So on the high end of things, it might be something like, how long have you been doing yoga? You mean in this lifetime? There, the implication is that I've been doing it in past lifetimes and I recall past lifetimes and blah, 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 lots of implications. Anything I ask, if I say something like, what color is your aura? That's implying that I see auras. If I, an implication of, what does your boyfriend think about this? The implication, I'm implying that you probably have a boyfriend, but it's also a leading question of, she might say, I don't have a boyfriend. So, but I'm implying, the implied communication there is, I want to respect that you have a boyfriend. And I'm doing it as a technique so that I solicit from her, does she have a boyfriend or not? And, but so from her perspective, I'm implying that I'm respectful. The truth of it is I'm using a communication technique to extract information from you without literally saying, do you have a boyfriend? Because that will oftentimes solicit an autopilot response from a woman that's probably been hit on all of her life since she developed of, yeah, or, why do you ask? It's hitting on the girl if you ask that for the most part, unless you say it a certain way in a certain context. So, yeah, that's how I use implications to solicit information from people. I use implications to allow other people's imagination to get carried away, and so my value can amplify in their mind. That's what comes to mind. Was that a good answer?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you hit on a couple examples and key distinctions that you can make from understanding how to use it as well. I mean, there's so much that one could delve into in terms of implied communication. It's a really valuable communication technique, especially when applied and it's aware, and like someone is aware of using it. So as one studies more and more, they come across and find ways of crafting communication in ways that leads to particular outcomes. So ideally, one person comes in with an idea of, oh, I want to get this particular outcome. There's many different ways you can do it. Obviously, direct is one way. But you mentioned that direct is not necessarily always the best strategy. There might be times where it's better to go in a way that's not direct, that brings the mind one place, then to another place, then to another place. And in doing so, and by bringing it in these three different locations, the mind naturally ends up at the last place where that's exactly where you want it. You can use communication in different ways to get at this type of idea. So it's really, really interesting. Yogi Chris, I guess, do you have any other thoughts on implied communication itself, or how it's
Well, yeah, I mean, the big thing is, like I've said, I want to reiterate that to be a good communicator, you need to be able to feel communication. You need to be in tune with what you're feeling, and you need to be able to feel, you need to be able to accurately process other people's communication to get a picture or a feeling of what they're experiencing. And if when you process their language and you feel their experience and it doesn't seem to be congruent with their other modes of communication, their face, eyes, body, and so on, that's where there's some implication, that the potential difference between what they're saying and what they're expressing fully. There's some implications in there. Now, but I want to say that implied, I think, connotes, meaning it's suggesting that they're intending to imply. And I know I said that earlier and I kept going back and forth. That's not exactly accurate, but there are some, they're either intending to imply something or they're intending to conceal something. I think that's accurate to say. And but either way, that's not good communication unless that's their tactic. I really like that sentence you said, crafting your communication that leads to a particular outcome. Now, so you can go into their implied communication, or you can accept it as it is and move on from wherever they said. There's a lot to be done with that, but it's useless to teach techniques on top of it if you're not aware of the feeling of people's communication. How do you get aware of the feeling of people's communication? First, you got to clean out your system. Now you could go about it different ways. This is the silent flute way. This is ninth limb yoga. This is some breathing and some silent sitting, just a little bit, not like tremendous Vipassana meditation or something, just a little bit to settle down inside so that you can start to pick up when communication disturbs your peace. When you can pick up that communication first you got to get peaceful. Then you pick up that some communication is disturbing. It could be internal communication or it could be someone else's communication. Then you start to get you'll over time develop an awareness that communication is disturbing my peace, which means it has energy. It's the only way you can disturb something. If it has energy, then you'll just naturally start to map out. And if you're in my program, I'll teach you some word energetics and some of alchemy with language and things like this. Some different, neurolinguistics, ways that you can use different words or replace words or rearrange them that will change the feeling of a sentence. And well, how does that happen? It's because there's energy in the sentence. So the step one is, some breathing meditations, get settled inside and then start to learn a little bit of linguistics and feel the difference between saying it this way or saying it that way. Changing nothing else about what you're trying to express. If you say it this way, it feels differently than if you say it that way. That's because the words are communicating not only a meaning, they're communicating an energy. So to answer DC's question really quickly, can communication literally be taught? I don't know what you mean by that. The implied communication in that question is that he seems to think that maybe the previous answer was metaphorically or that would be the opposite of literally, right? Literally or poetically, something other than literal. Yeah. So can communication literally be taught? Literally, communication was taught. That's how you know how to communicate now. You have already been taught how to communicate. That's why you know how to communicate right now. So why couldn't you be taught again? Why couldn't you learn more? You're always learning. You're learning your communication. And, being taught means that there's a teacher that's intentionally teaching you. You are always learning and updating and upgrading your communication. You were intentionally taught your communication in school, language arts, or by your parents when they were trying to teach you the ABCs or something, whatever. Can now, as an adult, you literally be taught communication? Yes. The difference that that must be understood is that I could teach you all the communication in the world, but I can't communicate for you. It's always going to be you. I mean, I could speak for you, but that's not going to change your communication. When you want to start communicating, you're the only one that can do that. So I can teach you how to communicate, but you got to jump out of the nest and do it. But yeah, of course, communication can be taught. Anything that any human is doing, you can be taught. It can be broken down into steps, and you can break those steps down into more steps so that anybody can start on the ladder of progression to learn whatever it is a person is doing. They're not a superhero. They're not a genetic mutant. I mean, if you want to take that example, but that's an exception. That's for most people, whatever they're doing, anything they're doing. They're email marketing, they're a yoga teacher, they're a salesperson, they're a bodybuilder. Whatever they're doing, anything can be broken down into steps and be transmitted to another person. Because that is what people do. People are the communicating animal on earth. And everything that a person is doing is only made possible because of communication. So anything you want to do can be taught, and it's got to be communicated to you, or you got to figure it out on your own, but that's going to be a long route. So get a teacher. As always, I'll close out my statement and hand it over to Akash. Go to ninthlimb.com if you like what I'm doing. If you like the way I communicate, go to ninthlimb.com, sign up for the Silent Flute. If you're catching this on iTunes, leave us a review, some stars or whatever. And you can catch our free Facebook group where we give away some teachings. That's called Enlightened Masculinity Facebook group. So I'll hand it over to you, Akash, for any closing statements.
Yeah, closing statements on my end are like, subscribe, share this with others. I mean, Yogi Chris and I have spent a lot of time making distinctions for ourselves in terms of how to communicate better and in ways that are conducive to the outcomes that we seek in life. Now, that outcome could be trying to pick up a girl. That outcome could be getting particular business. That outcome could be improving a relationship with family or some other person. But at its core, what we're really doing is becoming more aware of how we communicate with each other and how we use this art and science of communication to achieve the outcomes that we want in life. With that, I highly encourage you guys to check out the Enlightened Masculinity Facebook group. We really are putting out some amazing content out there. And with that, I would just like to say, keep up, thrive, and stay sexy. These are really important words to me, and I impart them to you. Namaste, Yogi Chris.
Namaste, everyone. See you next time.